Hello everyone, and thank you all for tuning in to Tips on Writing, the web series where we go over tips and tricks to writing your very own short story or novel. These tips were all created by Joseph Blake Parker, and if you wish to read them all, then you can go to his DeviantArt page in the description. And now without further ado, let's get into the tips. 8 tips for composing each chapter of your novel. Tip 1. Know the importance and purpose of chapter division. We've talked a little in the past about how reading, even when it's done for enjoyment, is like an exercise of mental fortitude. Just like people who play a physical sport like soccer just for the fun will get tired and thirsty after a while and need a break. So too will your readers. Chapters serve as a multifunctional tool for giving a reader a psych break from the mental exercise of reading. First, the completion of reading an entire chapter subtly encourages your reader by making them feel like they've made progress, sort of like looking at the scoreboard and becoming encouraged by your own efforts. So even if your reader's rest is only the time it takes to turn the page to the next chapter, they are refreshed by the transition. Second, a chapter break gives a reader who is too tired or strapped for time a place where they can safely put the book down for a while, so that they can rest for a more prolonged period of time. The other purpose that the chapter serves is specifically for the author to give organization to their novel. It's like looking at a large and complicated math problem, and then choosing to simplify and work smaller parts of the problem that you've singled out and isolated from the rest, before tackling the entire thing. Tip 2. Know your options for chapter divisions. Beyond chapter length, there are a number of options that you have for customizing your chapter divisions and making them your own. One of the things I like to do when writing is to have all of my plot points serve as their own chapter, creating a 12-chapter novel. The result of this, however, is that some of my chapters become obnoxiously long. My solution to this problem was the introduction of named and unnamed chapters. Whenever I break into a new plot point, I actually give the chapter a title instead of just a number. I got this idea from some of the works of Stephen King, whose style is to sometimes break his chapters fully, meaning starting a new page with a large margin above the text, like chapter breaks are typically done, and to sometimes have smaller breaks if the chapter does not mark a significant shift in the plot, by simply having a paragraph break a line of text that signifies the chapter's progression and then the continuation of the story. Giving a title to your chapters can also serve a variety of functions, from giving them extra meaning through poetic irony, to extra humor, to giving your own purpose for the chapter organized. You can also include quotes underneath the chapter heads, as I've begun doing. Or you can leave simple and organized numeration, which will hide your presence as an author and allow a different and more clear level of immersion into the story. There are many possibilities, and the important thing is to take personal pride in your choice and construct your chapter divisions with purpose, no matter which one you choose. Tip 3. Create a 3-act plot structure for each chapter. Whenever you choose to break your chapters at every plot point, between plot points, or inside plot points, the construction of your chapter will be more powerful if it's like a short story in and of itself. This doesn't mean that you need a long and complicated 12-point plot outline for each and every chapter, more like a beginning, a middle, and an end that'll serve to tell a small story within the larger one. By constructing your story like this, you assure that there is both a point to what you're writing at all times, as well as progression. Often, beginning writers in their attempts to get from point A to point B create long, bland, and almost useless chapters that only serve to physically transfer the character from castle to the lair of the dragon. Such blandness doesn't need to exist. Every chapter should have the hero encountering a problem, growing from that experience, and then encountering a climax where he or she overcomes or is overcome by the problem. So, if you need to get your hero from the castle to the dragon's lair, have them encounter a misadventure along the way. One that is relevant to the story, which helps the character grow, and which allows their movement in the way that you need. For example, you can have them meet an annoying, troublemaking goblin who tests the hero's patience as he travels, and eventually teaches in the confrontation/climax that sometimes bothersome creatures are more complicated than just another monster that needs to be killed. This would add complexity to the story by setting up the hero to deal with the dragon with a greater level of understanding and empathy towards it. Doing this will make sure that every chapter is vital to the story, and that your audience isn't bored, and that your character is always moving. Your chapter breaks can always play into the structure, signifying the start of each little story, or even signifying divides in the beginning, middle, and climax of each little part. Tip 4. The shorter the chapter, the more inclusive it becomes. Let's look at reading a story as a mental exercise, like a journey up a mountain. A chapter is a single trail up the mountain. As we all know, some people are better physical shape than others, not based on how good or smart or awesome the person is, but simply based on past experience. If you make a trail 8 miles long, you are automatically capping how many hikers will attempt the journey up the mountain. They'll take one look at the length and be too discouraged to even make the attempt, or else become exhausted just after one leg of the journey and turn back. However, if each trail that leads up the mountain is only a mile long, with a rest area, food, and lodging at the end of each, many more hikers will feel up to the adventure, even if the mountain, or story, is the exact same size. Readers are a lot like hikers. More of them will feel able to tackle a challenge if you break it up into bite-sized chunks. They're still making the same strenuous and impressive journey up some perilous mountain, but they will feel more able, and ultimately be able to grow in their ability to hike more. That being said, some hikers do enjoy the challenge in and of itself, albeit a smaller number. So if you're writing a difficult sci-fi novel with intense political overtones for a small niche of readers who enjoy a challenge, it may serve you well to have longer chapters. Tip 5. Make every chapter opening a hook. While readers can learn to enjoy the journey that your book takes them on, particularly once they've spent enough time reading and just fall in love with the characters naturally, that's not what drives them to begin the story. What drives them to begin reading your book can be an interesting cover or title, an interesting synopsis on the back, or an interesting first page, each of which serve as a hook. A hook, in simple terms, is any device which serves to interest your reader and drive them forward, usually an interesting situation that drives the reader forward by their desire to know more about it. This can take shape as a farm boy learning he has magical powers, a high school girl finding she's fallen in love with a vampire, or any other interesting scenario that would need to play out in an unusual and complex way. This principle functions in the midst of a novel as well as the beginning, as every chapter's opening can serve as a hook that introduces a new and interesting problem in its own right. These mini-hooks will drive your reader forward with an eagerness to discover the resolution to each new problem, while also watching the major plot dilemma slowly unfold. Tip 6. End on a cliffhanger. In the spirit of opening every chapter on a hook to increase the reader's interests in the story flow, you can also end every chapter on a cliffhanger. This is one of the secrets to writing a novel that readers call a page-turner, as the end of every chapter inspires them to move seamlessly to the next without ever slowing down. Now, this does not mean you should fail to resolve the situation, or hook, that you presented at the beginning of the chapter. Rather, that you should resolve the climax and introduce a new problem after the previous chapter's one is resolved. The hook for the subsequent chapter then becomes an expanded situation or problem that was introduced by the previous chapter's cliffhanger, We see this a lot in sequential television shows and comics. The hero resolves a problem they've been dealing with throughout the entire episode. A new problem arises, like an ally being kidnapped, for example. The episode ends, and then the next episode hook, or situation, is a question on how the hero will be able to save his or her ally. Often the cliffhanger is a very brief and shocking glimpse at a problem to come, whereas the hook will expand upon that problem in more detail. In addition, this will give you, the writer, a good starting place for when you begin writing the next chapter. You already have a problem to deal with, and you don't have to waste time twiddling your thumbs looking at a blank document, waiting for inspiration for what will happen next. Tip 7. Make sure you can name the objective of your chapter in one sentence. Each chapter of your story should be purposeful to the overall plot, either directly or indirectly. And there should be no chapter that you are able to cut out without losing something. That's not to say that every chapter has to have some dramatic importance. To the contrary, your story will gain a more pleasant and diverse feel if some of your chapters are more lighthearted than others, especially in a comedy. However, each chapter should at least contain a little more revelation about your characters, some challenges, some growth, and some physical progression toward the place they need to go next, and preferably some combination of all of the above. One way to accomplish this is to be able to state in one concrete sentence what you hope to accomplish with that chapter. The way I do this is I give each chapter a title which summarizes my objective. For example, if my chapter is about a hero named Susan, who is a space adventurer, going to meet the antagonist for the first time, I might caption my title, Chapter 5, Susan Meets the Alien Queen. This gives me a goal to accomplish and ensures that every chapter moves the story forward. Tip 8. After finishing a chapter, take notes as to the status of your characters. As your story progresses, you can annotate all of your major characters' progress in 3 ways: through overarching plot outlines, their personal plot outlines, and the world map. Taking notice to the status of your characters does a few things to help your story along. The overarching plot is the easiest of the 3, particularly if you've created a chapter for each plot point, and will assure that all of your characters are moving together through the unfolding core plot of your novel. The personal outline, particularly for the secondary characters, is essential for making sure that each of their entire stories are being told, and not cut halfway through or glanced over, especially when you have a large number of secondary or even primary protagonists. The world map helps you keep track of where your characters are physically, as nothing is more annoying than writing 4 or 5 chapters and then realizing that you've left one of your characters in the woods with time gaps that are unaccounted. Combined, these notes will assure that your characters are changing and shifting within the story, making it a more fluid, alive, and dynamic experience for the reader. Well, that was 8 tips for composing each chapter of your novel by Joseph Blake Parker. Thank you all for listening. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you'd like to read more tips by Joseph Blake Parker, then you can go to his DeviantArt account in the description. And like always, I'll see you all next time.